Welcome to the Schools podcast. My name is Dr. Sarah Hanson and I'm a researcher at the University of East Anglia and a team member on the Schools project. In this podcast, Schools PhD student Ellen Boucher and former Crystal Palace captain Freya Holdaway discuss the Schools project, concussion in women's sport and the importance of including females in research on the long-term effects of exposure to repetitive sport-related head injury on brain health. Asking the questions is the Telegraph's Fiona Thomas, a leading journalist in concussion in women's sport. Fiona recently was nominated for an award for the International Sports Press Association's Young Reporter of the Year. She was placed third among the international competition for her story about concussion in women's football.
So Ellen, can you start by just telling us a bit about what the Scores project is?
Sure. So the Scores project is an independent research project investigating the long-term effects of a lifetime of participation in sport on brain health. We're particularly interested in the effects of exposure to repetitive head injury through sport and the potential long-term consequences of that.
Right, and in terms of the actual individual taking part in the Scores project, what does the participant have to do? What sort of tests are involved?
So the way that the Scores project works is that a participant will complete regular testing every 6 months. They will repeat two sets of assessments with a 3-month interval between each one. So it requires 30 minutes of their time every 3 months, in which they will complete a series of questionnaires asking about things like their sporting history, or also measuring things like their mental health and behaviour. And they'll also complete sets of assessments that look at things like attention or executive functioning and different cognitive domains as well.
Right, and why is it so important?
Well, it's important because we know very well from the research that there are many positive effects of participating in sport, especially on brain health. However, the research is currently starting to support that there may be some negative long-term effects as well. So an example of this is an increased risk of neurodegeneration in particular. We know this from things like the field study, which was published in 2019, which looked at the health records of former professional footballers in Scotland and compared them to health records of a control population. They found that former professional male footballers were 3.5 times more likely to die of neurodegenerative disease than their matched control population. So obviously this is concerning because it means that there might be an increased risk for a long-term neurodegenerative disease for people who have been exposed to repetitive head injury through sport. Dementia and neurodegenerative disease in general is an increasing issue for society. It's obviously a horrible disease for the individual, but it has high burdens on people around them, like their family and their carers as well. And nowadays, we're starting to look at ways that we can reduce this prevalence of diseases like dementia. And one of the things we can look at is modifiable risk factors, so things like smoking behaviours or alcohol consumption, and also exposure to repetitive head injury. So that's why this research is really important, because we need to look at one of these modifiable risk factors to see what this link looks like and what we can actually do about it as well.
Right. And what do you think is left to learn, really, in all of this?
Yeah, so this field is in its infancy for sure, and there's still a lot left that we need to learn. We're starting to establish that there may be a link, but we're unable to establish yet whether there's a causal link here. So research is really looking into what this link looks like, how different things might affect the long-term effects. So things like age of first exposure to repetitive head injury, frequency of exposure, all of these things are still open questions in the field. And of course, we still have this open question about how it affects females as well, because this is under-researched in the field at the moment.
Why might concussions affect females differently to males?
So it's still unclear in the research. It's certainly an interesting question and an important question to be asking as well. One of the theories out there at the moment is that it's linked to a female's relationship that they have with the hormone estrogen. So estrogen is neuroprotective. So that means when damage occurs, higher levels of estrogen can help to reduce the extent of damage. And as a female ages and throughout their lifespan, they obviously go through different cycles of estrogen throughout things like the menstrual cycle, throughout menopause as well, and in general as the female ages. So this is one of the things that there's some growing research into looking at, but it's certainly still a part of research that we're still looking for answers to big questions in.
And Freya, we know you're an ambassador for the schools project. What were your kind of personal reasons for wanting to get involved with it?
Yeah, so I've obviously had a career in playing football, and I've suffered some, quite a few serious concussions in a short period of time. And for me, it was about educating myself, but mainly around ensuring that the youngsters who are coming through have that protection and providing a safe space for them to have those conversations about how they're feeling. Going through concussion, I found it difficult to really understand the way that I felt, whether I felt 100%, whether I thought I felt 100%. So for me, it's mainly around ensuring that people can have an open and honest conversation around the way that they're feeling and if they're feeling ready to go back to the game and play.
Can you talk, Ellen, a bit about the challenges involved in recruiting women and former female soccer players for a study like this?
Yeah, so it is a challenging objective to include women within our age group because the Scores Project only recruits people who are over 40 living in the UK and who do not have a diagnosis of dementia. And if we look at women's football, particularly within the UK, it is difficult to find women who are now over the age of 40 who have had significant experience in playing football, particularly due to changes in professionalisation in the sport. When we ask our participants what level of sport they've played at, we ask them, have they played professional, amateur or recreational? But of course, what we're seeing is that many of our women who have had significant elite involvement in women's football can't tick that they're professionals because they haven't been paid to play. So what we're doing about this is we are looking at how we categorize these women based on the time period that they played in. So whether they played before the 2000s, between 2000 and 2010, or after 2010. So that we can get a better idea of what an elite women's footballer is in this time, and we can categorize these women correctly.
You're only 32, aren't you, Freya, still? So you're not actually old enough to be part of it.
No, I'm 32 next month, so I'm still clinging on to the extra days. Unfortunately, I'm not quite old enough yet to take, the test and participate completely in the project, but I've had those conversations with Dr. Gray and Ellen about, how and what ways I can get involved in the project and try and bring in female footballers that I've played with in the past and try and get them involved.
Yeah, well, it's clear to see that this area of research is, it's important to do. And Freya, like you said, you're an ambassador. Just wanted to touch on your own personal journey with concussions a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So firstly, I suppose, can you tell us a bit about your experience and how many kind of concussions did you have during your playing career at Crystal Palace and for Northern Ireland?
Yeah, so officially, I guess I had 3 quite severe concussions in a space of 18 to 19 months, which is quite a lot, to be honest. And I'm pretty sure, I can put my hand on my heart and say I've probably experienced more concussions before that without actually being diagnosed with a concussion. If your head room balls and seeing stars and feeling dizzy, I'm pretty sure you're on the verge to being concussed. But yeah, so mainly 3 concussions in the space of 18 to 19 months, really.
Right. I know we touched on the challenges associated with female recruitment for the SCORE study earlier, but are there any other major challenges involved with a project like this?
So one of the major challenges is, of course, it's meant to be a longitudinal study. So we've just started the testing in September of last year, but we're planning on running it for the next 10 years at least. And this is so important because other studies have just looked at, oftentimes they've just looked at one point of measurement. And we know that in progressive diseases like dementia or neurodegenerative diseases, we need to be looking at how brain health changes over time. And so, of course, this requires quite a bit of funding to be able to do this. So far, we've been lucky enough to be funded by the National Institute of Health Research Brain Injury MedTech Cooperative, and they've helped us to fund the initial stages of this research. But now, of course, we're looking for more funding to be able to continue to run this for the next 10 years at least, but also to be able to expand our participant group and to be using cutting edge technology as well to be measuring the different domains that we're trying to measure.
Fantastic, and fingers crossed you get that extra funding. I suppose to round off, lastly, I suppose an open-ended question to both of you, really, Freya and Ellen, but what would each of you like to see done next or happen next in this whole area of, female concussion and, brain injury research into females?
Do you want me to go first, Ellen?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think for me, it's a massive opportunity to educate people. I think it's one of those where I don't think people know enough. And again, there's not enough research that's been done, but I also think that, people can also be more proactive in going and finding out more information. I think for me, it's about creating a safe space and a safe environment for people to have conversations quite honestly around like how you're feeling. But mainly for me, it's more about making sure the concussion tests are done before season rather than oh gosh, you've got a concussion, now we'll use the test to see where you're at on the path to getting better. But how do you know if you've never done the baseline? And for me, it's about making sure that players are aware of what a concussion looks like, because it can look very different for different people, but also educating the managers to do the exact same. Like, what does a concussion look like for a female? What does it look like for a male? And the differences, and just ensuring that everybody's educated and people know it's okay to go through these motions, these emotions, and what the recovery may look like.
Right, definitely, I couldn't agree with you more there. Education is a massive piece to all of this, isn't it? And Ellen, what would you like to see personally, and perhaps on a professional level as well?
Yeah, I mean, as a researcher, I'm always going to say I think there should be more research in this area. I think there's still a lot of big open questions in this field. And whilst we've learned a lot in recent years and enough for us to be able to say, right, we need to be thinking about doing something about this now and looking at our policies and everything like that, I think we still need to be investing in research and making sure that studies are properly funded as well to be able to address the remaining questions well, so that in a couple of years' time, when we have these results, we can look back at our policies and make sure that players' welfare is being taken into the highest account at every level of this sport as well.
Definitely. Well, thank you both very much for your time today, and wishing you, Ellen, all the best of luck with the rest of the Scores project. And I'm sure we'll continue to see Freya shout about it from the rooftops as well in her ambassadorial role. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
No problems. Take care.